Hello, welcome to my channel. In this tutorial you learn how to use Blender to light up your D&D maps with lots of nice little details. I'll use a map I made for my own campaign, this Tavern on Wheels. To create the map I used a web tool called Inkarnate, but every comparable map maker will do just fine. Normally I'd use Inkarnate to hand paint light and shadow into my scenes, but this can become quite a lot of work if you have to light up large and more detailed scenes like these. So I've used my single brain cell really hard and it came up with something that suits me best. A simple setup to let the famous 3D software Blender do all the heavy lifting for me. It should work in most scenarios, although I will admit that it is a very janky setup and it might make other 3D artists cry. You have been warned. It works best on maps with a darker background and lighter features. Reason for that is that we will convert our map into a height map. I am using a neural network enhanced normal map generator for this. It's called DeepBump, it works well and it's free. Link is down below. I'll assume you know your way around Blender and your map maker for this tutorial, but even if you don't, I believe in you. You can do it. First we need to export our image. You want to have as many details in your image as possible, so make sure to pick a high resolution. Only recently they've added 6K and 8K resolution on Inkarnate, so click that and render your map. Write down the resolution somewhere because we'll need it for the next step. Now in Blender we delete the cube and lights, leaving only the camera. Make sure you're in cycles and have the experimental feature set enabled. Then go to the output settings and enter the resolution that you have written down. Next, add a plane and edit its dimensions to match the resolution of the base image in meters. Mine was this resolution, so I'll make it this big. I'm sure there's better ways to do that, but this works. Now we'll go to edit mode and subdivide the plane. Make sure that geometry is nice and square in the end, so the displacement won't be distorted. Add a subdivision modifier, pick simple and check the adaptive subdivision. Switch to the camera now and set the lens type to orthographic. Then mess around with it until it fits the whole plane neatly. This is to ensure that we'll have the correct aspect ratio and won't be having any stretching issues later. Now switch to the shader editor and give the plane its own material. Then add an image texture and plug it into the base color. This is where you add your map. Also connect it to the emission color and set the strength so the image is visible. Note that I have my exposure set to 0.1, so if yours is higher or lower, the values may vary a bit. Now click on your image and scroll down to the DeepBump Addon. You can try out different settings and with the image still active, generate your normal map texture. After a little while it will be done and you can plug it into the principal BSDF as usual. Now click your new normal map and generate a height map from that. Add a displacement node and plug your image into the height. Then plug the displacement into the corresponding output. In the material settings, choose displacement and bump. I think normally you're not supposed to do that, but in this chaotic, messy setup anything goes, so just do it. Now we'll make walls and floors so that the light can't spill from one room to another. That would look very weird. This is the last annoying little bit we'll have to get done before we can start finally painting with lights. So put on some music and cover the whole thing, it will be worth it later. Add a solidify modifier and extrude out the walls a bit, until they're big enough to block out the light. After you're done with that, go to the visibility options of your walls and uncheck camera. This way the walls will block out the light, but they won't appear in the render themselves. Now we finally get to the fun part. Now lower the emission strength to the point where your dark spaces feel really nice and dark while still visible. For me that was something like 1.8. Now you can finally add in your first light to the scene. For torches I like a nice orange point light with a little radius. For the material I like to up the roughness a bit and then add a coat with a lower roughness. For this you might as well just copy the values if you like. From here on out it's just an artistic process. You go to camera view, place new lights, watch the scene react and adjust strength, radius, placement. You can also use area lights or spotlights for like directional light effects and play with the colors. It's really fun. I recommend using different viewport levels for your subdivision modifier though, depending on how much detail you need. It can be quite good sometimes to take a look at it in like close up and in high detail, but unless you have a really strong computer, it can get a little bit too slow to work with it. After a little while, you should be left with something like this, a nicely lit, moody scene that looks just really pretty. This method also brings out a lot of tiny details, but you might notice a little problem, a hard shading line wherever a walls intersect with the image, but this is easy to fix. Just select your walls and give them a new material. Crank the roughness all the way up to 1 and then go down to transmission and crank this one up all the way as well. As you see now the hard lines are gone, but the walls still work as intended. Now in the final stage we can get to some detailing. I didn't like the shadow under the bar in the central room, so I quickly added in a plane and extruded it out only a little. I moved it around until the shadows looked better and then went to uncheck camera in the visibility options once more. Then I repeated the step to fix the remaining smaller issues and gave the new shadow objects the walls material as well. After a little tweaking, it's time to render and composite. For compositing I didn't really do much. I just added a clear node, chose bloom and adjusted the settings a bit. I chose a pretty low threshold so there was a lot of bloom, but I only mixed it in ever so slightly, because bloom really works best when it's used rather sparingly, I think, or it will look kinda cheesy. However, that's it. Your image is completely lit up. The difference is pretty big, I think, and I'm sure your players will like it. Yeah. I'm glad if you liked your this little tutorial. It's actually more proof of concept, really. I'm sure there's a lot of things that you could do better with this method. But yeah, if you liked it, maybe consider liking and commenting on the video, because that makes me really happy. I'm Ellie, I do creative stuff, and subscribing to my channel is like good posture. Meaning it is its own reward, so yeah, maybe do that. Alright, tschüss!